As a freelancer or someone who utilizes them, how can you spot an imposter from an actual business or a genuine opportunity? Today's guest is Ricardo Fayet. Ricardo is a co-founder of Reedsy, a community of over 150,000 authors worldwide and a curated network of 1,500 handpicked freelance professionals, from editors, cover designers, illustrators, book marketers, and publicists. They help bring over 500 books to life every month. Reedsy was named Book Tech Company of 2015 by a UK trade magazine. Ricardo has been invited to speak at the Frankfurt Book Fair, London Book Fair, NINC, and dozens of other writing and publishing conferences. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Ricardo, thank you for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
No, thanks for having me, Chris.
Can you give myself and the audience a little background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm mostly known as one of the founders of Reedsy, which is a marketplace connecting authors and publishers with what we like to think as the world's best talent in terms of publishing professionals. So that's editors, proofreaders, cover designers, book marketers, ghostwriters, all the people who can work at any point on a book, so that authors and publishers can hire them through our marketplace. So think a little bit like Upwork or Fiverr. But specifically for the publishing industry and very, very high end, we accept less than 3% of the freelancers who want to be listed on our marketplace. I've written, most of what I do is try to provide education to authors so that they can make the best use of the marketplace. So I've written a book, for example, on marketing books called How to Market a Book. I'm working on another one on Amazon Ads right now, and yeah, I've written several free courses for authors on various aspects of marketing, since that is sort of my specialty.
Yeah, and with COVID and whatnot, and kind of just probably even more than just COVID, there's this significant shift in the way that people work these days. It used to be, for you and I, our parents were probably, we're going to find a job, we're going to work there 20 years, 30, 40 years. Our generation, maybe we'll do 10 or 15 years at one stint. Now it seems like it's pretty unlikely that someone will be at a job for more than a couple of years, and everybody's got a side hustle. Everybody's got some projects on the side that they're doing. And I know that leads to all sorts of scams targeting those people. You got people that are eager to make a little bit of extra money and maybe not super business savvy. So let's talk about some of those scams. Actually, before we do that, let's talk through what you see as kind of the major freelancer platforms, just so we know kind of what platforms people are using.
Yeah, for me, the main platforms that at least I know of are Upwork, Fiverr, People Per Hour. These would be the kind of what we call generalist platforms, right? You can go hire a web developer, like you can go hire an artist, like you go hire a proofreader or someone to do basic data entry. All different skills are in there, and because they're so generalist, generally they're not super well curated, because it's very hard to vet all these different kinds of professions. And then I think the great thing about the past few years is that you've seen these kind of platforms emerge for all kind of industries. For us, we're in the publishing industry, so we've created a marketplace specifically for that. But for almost every industry out there, you're going to find a marketplace for it. There's probably a marketplace for builders, a marketplace for plumbers, a marketplace for any kind of service that you can imagine.
Yeah, it also makes me think there's probably both sides of freelancer scams. There's people that are targeting freelancers, and then there are people that are posing as freelancers.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's not always scams, but in our case, for example, there's a lot of people who, they like reading. They've got a degree in English literature or whatever, and they say, oh, I'm going to be an editor. And so they want to list themselves as an editor and work with authors and charge them editing rates, which are pretty high, because people who are professional editors, they've been doing that for the past 10, 20 years at the big publishing houses, and they actually know how to edit. And so sometimes, even with good faith, people try to go into these new businesses, these new careers that start as a hobby, and they don't necessarily do it in the right way, starting small and then building up, and only starting to charge proper rates once you've built up the experience and the portfolio to justify them.
So how if I'm looking to, let's say we'll put it in your business model, I'm an author. I've kind of assembled my thoughts into something, and I'm looking for an editor to kind of curate it and clean it up. How do I know? What were the things I'd be looking for in terms of warning signs that this person really doesn't have the experience that they have? What should I be looking for, or what should I be watching out for?
Yeah, I think you need to. It's fairly easy. I mean, you just need to ask what their work experience is. If they say, I've been helping a few friends to do their edits, to edit their books, and they really like it, then they're not a professional editor. They're a hobbyist, and they might be very good, and they might become professional editor in the future. But in the case of hard skills that need to be learned over a long period of time, generally in structures such as a publishing house, it's fairly simple to find an editor who's professional. If they've worked 10 years at Penguin Random House, then they're a professional editor. If again they've worked on a couple of manuscripts for friends, they cannot claim themselves as a professional editor.
Mm-hmm. And I've done a little bit of looking for kind of like one-off work for either through Fiverr or Upwork, where I just needed someone to, hey, I need you to find 100 quotes about privacy and security,
Mm-hmm.
And I've always just kind of find, well, this person's got 1,000 positive reviews. Okay, let me just use them. And for me, it's always been something that's been, if it turns out that they totally mess up the job and don't produce, it's the $10, $20, $50. It's no big deal. Like, how do you, in the more broad sense, look at a platform and say, okay, someone has matched my keywords as a type of contractor or freelancer that I want. Like, how do I know that what can I tell about the reviews? It's like, these 500 reviews, are they real? Are they fake? How do I know? How do I have any certainty? I guess we don't really have certainty, but how do I have a good indication that this person really is actually good at what they're claiming they're good at?
Yeah, I mean, first you gotta have trust in the platform where you find them, right? I think all of the platforms we've mentioned, the reviews can only be posted by customers who have hired those people through the platform. Mm-hmm. I think some of them, like Upwork, even mentioned the amount of hours or the dollars spent on the collaboration. So if you see a freelancer, a web developer, for example, who's got 100 reviews, but all of them were for $1 or $5 jobs, then it's going to look suspicious, right? But you can on these kind of sites, you can trust the reviews. So the reviews are definitely one of the main places I'd start looking. And even then, past the reviews, you need to treat it like a recruitment process. So ask for references, email or call those references to see what their actual experience were with them, because people are often, when it's on a public forum, when you need to leave a review on a public forum, a lot of people are good people and they don't want to, mess up the credibility of the freelancer. They don't want to hurt them. They would feel bad about it. So they're just not going to review, or they're going to leave a 4 or 5 star review that's short and doesn't say much because, hey, it didn't go well in my case, but I'm sure they're a good freelancer otherwise, so I'm not going to mess up their career. So it's always better to ask for a few references and call them up. And see and check out the kind of work that they've done. If you're going to hire a developer, for example, check out the kind of sites that they've created, make sure that they work well, that they look good, and that they resemble the kind of work that you want to get done.
Yeah, I've definitely done that with like graphic artists. I needed a logo designed that ooh, let me see some of your other logos that you've designed. Like, you might be good, but that's definitely not what I'm looking for. Like, maybe somebody else likes that particular style, but I don't like that style, so I'm going to go a different direction. So yeah, I've definitely looked at other work when it comes to graphic artists.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of artists, there's a big question of style, right? Every illustrator or artist is going to have their own style, so it's super important to look at past work, and it also makes it easier to hire them because you can instantly see what their work is like. Like, images speak to you. If we're talking about like other skills that are much more difficult to assess, like editing in our case, or translation, for example. It's hard to judge a translation because you don't speak the language usually. Then you need to have other factors, to build trust.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like as specific to the editor. I say, well, if the end result is good, you kind of don't know entirely if that is a result of a really good editor who cleaned up a poor author's work, or you just had a really good author and the editor didn't have much to do.
That's true. That's why asking for references and reading those reviews is really important, because the author is generally going to tell you, everyone, if the editor was involved in completely redrafting the manuscript and making it much better.
Yeah. So let's flip this around and talk about some of the scams that are targeting freelancers, because we know that whenever someone's looking to make money, looking for jobs, there's always someone out there looking to take advantage of those people. So what kind of freelancer scams are you seeing out there?
I think the most common one is probably companies trying to hire freelancers as full-time employees. Companies trying to hire freelancers instead of hiring employees, and just in order to get out of offering, the additional security, benefits, etc. That's the most common kind of problem out there with freelancing work. Other kind of freelancer scams are, platforms. There are also marketplaces are a little bit dodgy in that they're gonna promise a certain amount of work up front if they sign up. Sign up to our marketplace and we guarantee you're gonna earn $2,000 in your first 2 months because we have a ton of clients. And then you sign up there and there aren't that many clients, and maybe they have some fine print that explains why you're actually not entitled to that money. So I'd be wary of those marketplaces promising something upfront, especially if you've never heard of them, right? If you sign up to Uber and they say you've got a guaranteed driver income of like this much every month for the first 6 months, whether you get rides or not, I mean, you can trust Uber. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But they've got big enough reputation that, you can say, okay, I'm going to take the chance. But if it's a platform you've never heard of, that doesn't seem to be getting a lot of clients, and they promise you X amount of money, then you can probably doubt that, and you need to look into the fine print.
Yeah, and any platform that started last week is not going to be able to keep you busy, likely.
Exactly.
I know what I've also seen is that, or heard from freelancers, is that as new platforms will, let's say you're a graphic artist, that some reasonably new platform will start up, and someone will create a profile using your name, your kind of your handle, and grab all of your artwork and to show it as, hey, I'm John, and now you have someone like totally faking to be the artist. Yeah,
that's a common growth hacking tactic used by a lot of platforms. They just create a profile for you. That's happened to us as a company. We suddenly get a profile on one of these startup sites or startup marketplaces or whatever, and then you get an email saying, hey, you've got a profile here, finish creating it and sign up, etc. And that's just the worst way of going about things if you want someone to sign up for your service. And there's also as you said, there's two sides to every marketplace. So if we flip this around, one problem that we've had is we have public profiles for freelancers, right? And the ones who are accepted on our marketplace, the kind of 3% who we vet and accept, they'll get a little blue tick icon. Mm-hmm. But all the other ones, they're public as well. They get their public link, and so they can share their link even if they haven't been accepted to on the marketplace. And we've had this case, I think last year, where we're moving from scam to kind of serious criminal offenses here. But we got called by a lawyer who basically wanted to issue a subpoena to ask us for all the information in our database related to one person in particular who'd committed serious criminal offenses in the past, and we're now trying to pass as a psychiatrist, I think, or psychologist. And so they created a profile on Reedsy, which is a website that has nothing to do with that. But they named themselves psychiatrist. And since we make nice profiles, they look professionals, and they filled it in a little bit, then they were using that to kind of fool victims into booking sessions with them, because they had what looked like a professional profile on a website that was trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it works both ways. You've got the fake psychiatrist who is, claiming to be the real person, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can have fake people claiming to be like, someone, the new graphic artist platform shows up and someone creates a Banksy profile claiming to be him, uses his website as the reference, pulls in a bunch of his material, and all of a sudden, hey, I'll do some artwork for you for $500,000. Everybody else is like, hey, that's a good deal, but this is some guy in his garage who's never painted, who's never done graffiti art in his life before. So it's almost like there's this push and pull of, you have platforms that are coming up that are creating profiles of legitimate people and saying, hey, just come and finish them. But you also, as a freelancer, might almost want to be protective, and as new platforms launch, create your own, even though you don't plan on doing business there, create your account there so that people don't pretend to be you if you're well known in your industry.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say that, and even to protect your identity, and also because you never know where the platform might go in the future. So might as well help to have a head start and have a profile on there already, and get the emails from that platform, newsletters, and monitor how they're doing, because it might interest you in the future. I would say that these kind of scams, if they're too evident, if they're really stealing the identity of a really well-known person, then the platform is usually going to detect them. Like, it would be much easier for us to detect a fake profile by someone who would claim to be the world's greatest cover artist, or the most renowned cover artist, than it is for us to detect like a small profile of someone passing as a psychiatrist. That's impossible for us to find out.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the challenge with, I think, a lot of what's going on the internet right now is you have platforms that don't have the means to vet every single thing that happens on their platform, which is difficult. It's the platforms couldn't grow, the marketplaces couldn't grow to the size that they are if Fiverr had to vet every single account that's created. Fiverr couldn't exist. It's just not. It's not feasible. So it really puts everybody in the buyer beware category. The freelancers have to be careful to make sure that they're going to get paid, and the people that are using the platforms have to be careful that they're actually choosing people that have good work. And making sure it actually works out.
Absolutely, the way that platforms do it is more on they don't do much prevention, and they help correct things or get rid of scams when they arise. So if on Fiverr someone signs up like as a scam artist, once they're going to get that first or second project which goes badly, then people from Fiverr are going to start to investigate, see what went wrong in the collaboration, see that this person is actually scamming the other one, and get rid of them. But they will probably they'll have been able to scam a couple of people first. They have mechanisms in place to vet up to a certain amount, but obviously, as you can say, when the marketplace becomes really, really big, it becomes almost impossible, because it's not scalable to vet that many people, especially across that many different disciplines. I might be able to vet a cover designer, but if someone lists themselves as a JavaScript developer, I have no knowledge of JavaScript, and I cannot. If I were Fiverr, I could not have a vetting team for every different profession on the marketplace. So it's definitely hard, and on the other hand, it's tough you have this problem for freelancers as well, right? Because most marketplaces are not going to vet the client side of things. They're going to try to vet the freelancers, but they're not going to vet the clients. We don't vet the authors, for example. And so as a freelancer, especially if you're starting out, you got to be aware of scams targeting you, like people things as simple as people sending you or asking you for work and you not charging in advance, not charging an upfront fee. We've had this case, I think, once several years ago of an editor who just finished working with a traditional publisher, started freelancing on her own, so not a lot of experience with freelancing, and she just charged for the full project at the end when she delivered her edits. And since we've got a platform where payment is automated, like I think almost every other freelancer platform out there, we'd secured the payment details of the client. But we only make the charge when the payment goes through, which was at the end of the collaboration. The editor sent in her edits, and the author, turns out, didn't have enough money to make the transaction, and then never answered, and she got burned. So we try basically to do more education now with our freelancers and tell them charge an upfront fee, make sure that they've got a stake in this. Never deliver your work before the payment has gone through and has been verified to have gone through. And beware of people who look a little bit, not responsive, or their work is not great, or you basically have some suspicion that there might be something dodgy there. But it's a question of like making mistakes and learning for most people.
I definitely have seen that sort of thing before, where if particularly for freelancers who are working outside of platforms, that they're approached by a prospective client, right, and they say, hey, this is the job that we want to do. They do all the work to create the logo, and then they come back, okay, here's the logo. They do rounds of iterations, and the person goes, nah, I don't want to pay for it. And they've already given them the Photoshop files, and that's to me, that's heartbreaking for someone who's done a ton of work on a project, and then the person just turns out to not pay them. And it's particularly unfortunate because I think a lot of, if I'm here in Southern California, if I'm working with a freelancer that's here in Southern California, I have lots of legal means to.
Absolutely.
The freelancer and the client both have a lot of legal means that they can go after the person, but one of the advantages and disadvantages of the freelance work is that I think probably most of the freelancers I've dealt with have not been in the United States. So if something were to go wrong with the project, let's see, I need to find a lawyer in Germany, to go after this, and all of a sudden the cost to try to remedy a situation scale significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of we've seen these problems. Even we try to go as far as possible in cases like this to recover the funds, to get the author to pay, etc. But we're not going to sue someone who's based in another country. In most of the cases, even in the UK, we're talking small amounts here. We're not going to sue someone for $1,000. But yeah, as a direct client freelancer relationship, if you don't use a platform, an intermediary platform, you usually don't pay the intermediary fee, so that's great. But you also lose that extra layer of legal and dispute protection that platforms offer, right? If someone has 100 reviews on Upwork and they've clearly built their business there, and if you hire them through Upwork and they don't do a great job, or you feel like they're trying to scam you, then you can tell them, okay, I'm going to report this to Upwork, or I'm going to leave you a bad review, and they're going to start looking into things. So they've got, you have a little bit more leverage there because they're on a platform from which they heavily depend in terms of income. So that's where paying those fees for those platforms definitely comes in worth it. You have that extra layer of protection.
And it also works for the freelance. It works. Those fees work both ways. They protect the freelancers from fake clients, protects the clients from fake freelancers, and as long as the platform is doing what they're supposed to do, in the long run, it should work out for both parties and for the platform.
Yeah, it can only work out for the platform if it works for both parties.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I definitely have seen, and I think I talked about this on a previous podcast, are for people that are working outside of freelance platforms, that are, they've been established freelancer for a number of years, that they'll have a prospective client come to them with a project that seems very reasonable, has a reasonable amount of detail to it. The client knows what they want, but then they ask the freelancer to pay some other subcontractor through them. It's like, well, you're a website builder. We need a graphic artist also. We've got the graphic artist, but can you pay them for us, and then we'll pay you? To me, you always got to watch out for anything that's fishy or sideways. Anyone who's willing to pay you for something that you're not specifically doing should always be a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. They're probably trying to circumvent something legal there in terms of the number of collaborators they can work on, or they don't want to employ that graphic designer. But there's definitely something fishy. Because as soon as it sounds fishy, generally it's fishy.
Yeah. It's that's what I generally tell people: you have to trust your gut. If something is outside the norm or outside of, even if they present you a reason of why they're doing it this way, if it's, we need to hire a graphic artist also, can you pass through? Well, I'll get my own graphic artist to do it.
Exactly.
Because ultimately what the scam is that they hire you to do a project, then say, oh, hey, Bob over here needs a payment. So you make the payment to Bob, and then the client never pays you. So they basically, the client is Bob. So you basically just sent money to the scammer thinking that it was a subcontractor, and your client never pays you, or they write you a check that bounces, or it's a financial transaction that as soon as it hits your bank account, it gets reversed. Yeah. All those little things of if you're not cautious of, can get reversed fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've discovered is that as freelancers, you're very much at the mercy of the clients and their banks. Like if someone disputes a charge in the US, especially in the US, a little bit in the UK as well, the banks see their customer as, their customer. So first, the customer is right. So we're going to revert the funds. We're going to get the funds back. And then in order for the freelancer to recover those funds, they have to submit a lot of evidence and do a lot of extra hard work to recover those funds and not be charged the fee that usually comes with disputes. And that's something that always annoys me a little bit, because it puts you immediately presume that the client is right in this transaction. And since the client is a customer of a bank and the bank makes the decision, then the bank immediately protects them.
Yeah.
So I have a whole little bit of a grudge with that, but that's something you got to be conscious of as a freelancer. You got to know that this might happen. It's probably going to happen at one point or another. Whether the client is actually disgruntled with you and disputes the payment as a result, or just because they're scamming you, that can happen.
And I suppose that goes along with when you're a freelancer, you need to have good contracts. You need to have good documentation of what the expectation of the work is, the timetables, milestones. If you can get the client to pay you in installments as you work through the project, whereas you're not waiting until everything is done before you get the payment, and try to strike a balance with the client and keep the risk on both sides of it. I mean, it's I think that's what you're talking about. Like if both the client and the freelancer have skin in the game, they're both interested in making sure the project comes to completion in a way that's satisfactory for both parties. If the freelancer has collected all the money up front, or the client doesn't pay money until it's all done, it pushes the risk off to one party versus the other.
Absolutely. And you also got to be careful of not making things too legal or procedural as well, because I see some authors, they come on the platform immediately, they want to sign an NDA with a freelancer because the idea for their book is so unique and incredible that, every freelancer out there is going to want to steal it and write the book themselves and whatever. So as soon as you see signs of clients wanting an NDA, wanting this protection, that protection, etc., it can be really counterproductive for the work afterwards, because you spend both as the client and the freelancer, you spend more time with technicalities and the legalities of ironing out the contract and the whole thing than actually working together and getting the job done. So you got to trust people to a certain extent. And generally, what I say is you got to strike the right balance between, having solid contracts and solid legalities and trusting people. If you're on the one end of things, some freelancers, they don't even sign contracts and they trust people, and they know that 1 out of 10 contracts, they're not going to get paid, but they're fine with that because the 9 others are going to pay. And when they don't get paid, they've factored that into their business model and their planning. Others, they really want to make sure that everyone who hires them pays them. So they're going to want finer contracts, and they want to make sure that the client has skin in the game, as you mentioned, not deliver work before they get the payments, etc. You've got 2 ways of handling things, and I think if you find your balance there and something that works for you, then that's fine. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I can imagine, like you said, if the freelancer is understanding that, like, yeah, I'm gonna, something's gonna go sideways 10% of the time, if I'm willing to accept that for the so that I don't have to do all this additional paperwork, so I don't have to draw up all these contracts, then that might be worth it. Or the person who, like, I only want to work on one project a quarter, so I'm willing to have extensive contracts. That way I know the other person is really involved, invested, and if it means I lose some clients because of it, that's okay, because I really only want one client a quarter or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, the amount of work you want to put in the contract also depends on the amount of money you're getting for the job. I know on our platform, ghostwriting is a service that's a lot more expensive because you get someone who spends maybe several months of their time writing your book. So that's like month-long projects, and which can go into the 5 or sometimes 6 figures. And for that, obviously, they sign on top of the terms of use of our website and the standard contracts we create. They sign their own contracts. There's an NDA. There's all of that. When we're talking higher figures, obviously contracts are a lot more important, and you should even maybe get a lawyer on your side if you're the client to negotiate the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah, it's always that balance of ease of transaction and the protections that you want involved in that transaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
As the monetary value increases, the desire to have a contract, a desire to have a lawyer involved to review the contract, and the reasoning for it goes up.
Yeah, it's like with everything in life. Usually, the more you invest in something, if you buy a house, you really want a solid contract, right? If you buy a secondhand bicycle, you probably don't want a contract.
That's a very good analogy. When I'm buying a secondhand bicycle, I don't really need a contract. I like that. That's really good. So do you have any parting advice for either clients or freelancers before we finish off today?
No, man, I'm going to steal your advice of trusting your gut. I think that's really the most important thing. Don't hesitate to say no on a potential contract, whether from the client or freelancer side. If you feel that something's off or something's fishy or something just doesn't sit right with you, or you feel you're not going to be able to work well with that person, especially if we're talking about jobs that are going to require a lot of collaboration. The kind of stuff we see on our platform is people coming with their books. Sure, it's their hobby, but they've poured a ton of time into that. So they're going to be very protective of their books. And when you work with a cover designer or an editor or a ghostwriter, you're going to work really hand in hand. There's going to be a lot of back and forth. So what I always say is you not only need to hire someone who's a professional, who has got great reviews, who's got references, who you know is going to do a professional job, but also someone who, on a personal level, you think you can get along with, because you're going to have a lot of back and forth and communication with that person. And if you think alike or get along, and even maybe can make a friend in the process, that's all for the better. It's going to make the collaboration a lot smoother.
I love that. That is great advice. Ricardo, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. If you found this episode insightful, please share this episode with someone you know and leave a review at easypray.com/review. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Ricardo Fayet can be found at easypray.com/96.